work in a pretty busy hospital downtown, in NICU. I usually work at night, and I kid you not, this happened to me less than 5 minutes ago. I figured it would be good to get this down in writing before I forgot. It's also a way for me to have some sort of proof in case something comes out of it. During orientation, we are taught to be observant to the signs of a possible abductor. We were taught to look for oversized clothing, bags, and shifty behavior. Luckily, I've never encountered a strange individual, until just now. It's currently 2:59 AM, and I've been sitting at the front desk since 11. I'm a nursing student, so I usually just do clerical work around the unit. I also watch the cameras to make sure no one is here that isn't supposed to be here. It's usually pretty quiet at night. However, I already had a sort of weird night, so this just adds a cherry on top of it. The NICU, and most of the second floor, is a locked unit. This means that in order to gain entrance, you have to pick up a phone, which then rings to the desk. Usually it's parents who want to see their babies, and family members who are lost. It quiets down around 11, so no one usually comes in or out during my shift, with the exception of housekeeping. One of the security cameras is situated so I can see who is picking up the first phone. I had been sitting here browsing Reddit when the phone rang. I glanced over at the phone thinking it was a parent wanting an update or something like that. It took me a second to register that it was the number for the first set of doors. I picked it up and looked over at the screen. There was a lady in baggy clothing with a sling on her arm. I answered the door and she said she wanted to find her cousin, who apparently had been brought up for the emergency department. I asked for the last name, and she intelligibly rambled off a Latino name that I only caught the first part of. Knowing that we did not have any new admissions, I told her we didn't have anyone by that name. I tried to get some information out of her, and she again said that her cousin had been brought up from the ED. I told her in that case she would want to go to labor and delivery and talk to them. She hesitated and then said, "Okay," and walked away. I got a really weird feeling from her, so I checked the census to see if there was anyone that was assessed in L&D, and there wasn't. So either she was at the wrong hospital, or she wandered into the unit to do something a little bit more sinister than just see her cousin. I shrugged it off and figured if her cousin was in L&D, that she would find her and all would be well. About 5 minutes later, the same lady appeared in her extremely baggy clothing and her sling. The only difference was, this time, she was putting the sling on, and was using her injured hand to mess with something in her oversized sweatshirt. She picked up the phone and once again asked to be let in to find her cousin, and that L&D said that they had no one by that name. I told her the exact same thing, and that she would need to get into contact with her cousin and go back over to L&D. She got hostile for a second and then hung up the phone. Whether or not she was trying to gain access to the unit for things that she shouldn't be doing, I'll never know. But that creepy lady looked like a baby snatcher for sure. I had just finished my first year at university, and I had taken up a position as a taxi dispatcher with my boyfriend's cousin's taxi company. For the first week and a half, I worked mainly day shifts until the owner decided to extend the hours to 24/7, and I was the lucky employee who would be covering 3 to 4 of these shifts a week. The next week I was working my first night shift alone. The driver would be out all night looking for fares, which meant a lot of the night would just be me. I wasn't uneasy working such a shift by myself, since I had worked at a 24-hour coffee shop and was used to midnight shifts. It was also a Wednesday or a Thursday night, so it wasn't very busy. The best part about this job was that my boss would let me use the internet to play video games on my laptop in the office. From the computer desk in the office, I could see the front door, a portion of the front desk, and most of the front windows, so I could keep a close eye on what was happening outside. The bell above the door always alerted me to a new customer, so I wouldn't be caught off guard if I got too into the game. On this particular night, I was working with a taxi driver named Dave. Dave is about 6'3" and 300 plus pounds. Plus he suffers from several health problems, one of which made all of his movements slow and painful. He definitely wasn't Mr. Fitness, or the type of person who would be able to defend themselves or others very easily. Sometimes during the early hours of the morning, around 1:30 to 2 AM, Dave gets a call to go pick up someone in the town 15 minutes away. He gathered up his stuff and drove into the night while I headed into the office and continued playing my video games. About 15 minutes later, I caught something over the top of my laptop. My mind froze. I could hear it panting, and in the reflection of the window, I could see someone sitting in one of the waiting chairs. I walked to the doorway that connects the front room and the office. I glanced into the seating area and nearly shit bricks. Some guy with a massive rat tail had managed to ninja his way into the office and was now sitting in one of the chairs with his face buried in his hands, panting heavily. He was dirty, sweaty, and sounded like he had just ran a marathon. Now the rat tail should have tipped me off, but I found it more hilarious than frightening. A few moments passed, and I finally got up the courage to ask him if he needed a cab. He didn't respond at first. I asked him again, and he looks up at me. I took a step back into the office. His face was scratched and covered in blood from the wound on top of his head. I was shocked and immediately offered assistance to him. He replies with, "I'm fine, I don't need no help. I just want to go home." I asked him if he needed a cab, and if so, where was he going? He told me he lives about 20 minutes away and wants Dave to take him home. After that, shit started to get weird. I called over to Dave using the radio to tell him that there was a fare in the office and that he wanted a ride. He told me he'd be there for another 10 minutes. My hand was on the phone the entire time in case this guy made any sudden movements. Instead of going back into the office, I decided it was best to stay out front where there are two great big bay windows that make it easy to see what is happening inside the taxi office. I didn't feel as though he was a threat at all, but he seemed really angry at something, so I wanted to make sure that if something happened to me, people would be able to see it. So I walked out into the front room, and as I got closer to the gentleman, that's when I saw it. He's not just bleeding from the head, but from the shoulder and knee. I asked him again if he's okay, and then I offered to call an ambulance for him. That was a bad idea. "You don't need to be doing that," he told me. "It ain't like I killed nobody, right? I never killed anybody. Don't go doing that. You don't need to call anybody. I just want to go home." "I'm sorry, I just noticed that you're bleeding pretty badly and thought maybe you'd like someone to make sure you're okay," I replied. "I didn't kill anybody. That asshole should have kept his mouth shut. He had what was coming to him. He shouldn't have said those things. But it ain't like I killed nobody. You don't need to call nobody. I just want to go home." "Okay," I tell him, "but you're bleeding." "It ain't like I killed nobody," he replied. "I swear, I didn't kill nobody. Please don't call the cops. I don't need the cops. I just need to go home. I didn't kill anyone." Silence for a few minutes. He notices the phone clutched in my hand. "I fell down," he blurted out. "Pardon?" "I fell," he repeated. "That's why I'm bleeding. I fell. It ain't like I killed nobody." He got up and started pacing. He was growing impatient for his cab, and I was scared shitless. Blood was now on the chair and floor. I had the phone in my hand, and every once in a while he broke the silence with another string of incoherent babbling about how he had done nothing wrong, because he hadn't killed anybody and that I didn't need to call the cops because he was a good guy. Eventually Dave radioed that he was about 2 minutes away, and I breathed a sigh of relief. He pulled up out front, the man got into the car, and they drove off. Now I'm worried for Dave, so I called the cops. I reported what happened, and they followed the taxi cab to this guy's house where they arrested him. Turns out this guy had run away from a nearby bar after he had physically assaulted a fellow patron. To what extent, I never found out. They say he injured him with a sharp object, I'm assuming a pocket knife or a needle, and took off running, fell and managed to find his way to the taxi office. During his time in the cab office, the police had been searching for him. So technically no, he didn't kill anybody, but he did assault and attempt to kill someone. I also found out that one of the other drivers, Steven, knew the guy from high school years ago. His name is Duke, which explains the rat tail, and he has a history of violence. He also has a history of coming home drunk and cracking his wife's skull open from time to time. Whether he had planned to that night, I couldn't say, but I'm just glad that the guy ended up in the drunk tank for the night. His wife was unharmed, and the guy who got stabbed didn't die. At least I assume he didn't. I still see Duke from every now and then, walking the streets with his glorious rat tail, which means he didn't get arrested. This happened to me about a week ago. I found a summer job at our local supermarket, and about 2 weeks in, I got asked to work the late night shift, which is from 11 PM to 5 AM. I accepted since I was in need of the money and I'd never sleep early anyways. Everything was fine and dandy until about 3 AM, when a shirtless, scarred up guy came into the store. After lingering around the store for a while, he quickly came up to the counter, making intense eye contact with me. As I was about to ask him if he needed any help, he whispered, "Don't you dare move." I didn't hear him at first, so I asked him if he could repeat that. At that point, he got agitated and yelled, "Make another sound and I'll cut you up." In a swift motion, he vaulted over the counter, going to the alcohol section, trying to grab a bottle of whiskey. Thankfully, the owner has hid a baseball bat under the counter. The moment he turned his back to me, I took the bat and swung full force at his knee. He winced in pain and tried to get up. I winded my bat again, acting like I was going to hit him again, just to see him pull out a homemade shiv of some sort. And the moment my bat, and he ran for the door and got out. The day after, I called the cops and showed them the security camera footage, but they haven't contacted me since. I think it's safe to say that I won't be working the late night shift again for a long time. So scarred, shirtless guy, let's not meet again.